Hello again. In this short video, I would like to share with you some information about transformational leadership approach. The majority of information presented in this video comes from Peter Northouse's book, Leadership Theory and Practice. Here I have an outline. We're going to describe this approach to leadership. We're going to compare transformational leadership to charismatic leadership. We're going to look at the full range leadership model. We're going to look at two other transformational leadership approaches, and then we're going to look at some lessons learned. So when you think about transformational leadership, this is the approach to leadership that is quite often discussed in media. It's one of the most popular approaches to leadership. It's popular among scholars and also among people in the media. It was first proposed in 1978. And this approach belongs to the relational theories of leadership or relational approaches to leadership. It focuses on the process between leaders and followers. And as a result of this process of leadership, both sides are transformed, leaders and followers. Leaders in this approach to leadership inspire collective visions. They encourage creativity and change. They build trust. They develop followers. They recognize achievements. And quite often, this type of leadership deals with emotions, motives, values, beliefs. It has a moral and ethical component and focus on achievement and other aspects that are involved in the transformation process. Often incorporates elements of charismatic and visionary leadership. In fact, many people see them the same, although scholars try to make a distinction between these three types of leadership. Quite often, transformational leadership is contrasted to transactional leadership. We're going to talk in just a few minutes about the two. And then also it's contrasted to pseudo-transformational leadership. If transformational leadership has a positive outcome or focuses on that result where both followers and leaders are changed as a result of this relational process. In terms of pseudo-transformational leadership, the outcome quite often focuses on the leader. So there is some similar impact of followers in terms of values, emotions, achievement, but the majority of the outcomes focus or are directed towards the leader. So at the same time, when James McGregor Burns proposed the transformational leadership, Robert House, 1976, proposed the theory of charismatic leadership and identified charisma as a special gift that certain individuals possess and gives them the capacity to do extraordinary things. In terms of leadership, it has a charismatic impact on their followers. So charismatic leaders act in unique ways that have a specific charismatic effect on their followers. Here are the elements of House's charismatic leadership theory. You see three components right here. The charismatic leaders have certain personality characteristics, like they are dominant, they have that intrinsic desire for influence or to influence others, they tend to be confident, they have strongly held values, and those personality characteristics quite often are exhibited in their behaviors. So the second element of this theory are the leaders' behaviors, and charismatic leaders tend to be role models. In other words, they exhibit certain characteristics that serve as strong role models for followers. They show competence. In other words, they know what they are doing. They tend to know how to articulate goals and communicate high expectations. and then also try to touch on those motives of individuals. So they are good communicators, and then they express confidence and motivation and arouse the drive and followers. And then there are all kinds of positive impact or effects on followers. They're listed right here, whether it's trust in leader's ideology, belief similarity between leader and followers, affection toward the leader, obedience, identification with leader, emotional involvement. As you can see right here, as I mentioned earlier, the charismatic leader, through their personality characteristics and their behaviors, have specific charismatic effects on their followers. So those are similar elements to transformational leadership. Here we have a full range model of leadership that incorporates several elements that we've discussed and other approaches to leadership. So I have the elements right here, and then I'm going to include the agenda right here, and then we're going to look at each of them. So on the lower left corner, we see the LF right there. It's a laissez-faire. Laissez-faire, we discussed this approach to this leadership behavior and the behavioral approach to leadership. And it's basically, we call that absence of leadership. There is no leadership at all. And then we have the two MBPE there, A and P. MBPE are management by exception, passive and active. In this situation, we call this transactional leadership. Transactional leadership involve exchanges or some type of exchanges between leaders and followers. When a leader engages in management by exception, passive, they tend to react only when a follower is not doing what they're not supposed to do. And management by exception, active, leaders tend to be more active and most engaging micromanaging. They engage in frequent observations and of employees' performance, and if the performance it's not going the right direction, they're going to take corrective action. And the next one is contingent rewards. Contingent rewards here is just basically it's an exchange between leaders and followers, quite often organizational exchanges. So a follower comes to work, or an employee comes to work, they get a salary, they get some benefits, maybe a bonus, and there is an expected level of performance, and if they're going to achieve that level of performance, they're going to be rewarded. So there are contingent rewards. Most of this are, you see right here, they're passive and not that effective from a leadership perspective. So where we move into this effective outcomes, we are focused on this 4 I's of transformational leadership. And the first one is idealized influence. When I think about idealized influence, we are focusing on the charisma component that we discussed earlier. So in this situation, leaders act as role models. They tend to have deeply held values, and they exhibit those values in their behavior. Therefore, they act as role models for their followers. Also, the second I here, it's inspirational motivation. Transformational leaders tend to be good communicator. They tend to use symbols when they try to inspire followers in order to push themselves to achieve more. So they tend to, again, use inspirational motivation in order to influence followers towards greater achievement. The third I is intellectual stimulation. In this situation, transformational leaders tend to challenge their followers to think outside the box, to think about new ways of doing things. As we live in this turbulent environment with constant change, that's where transformational leadership has a place to challenge their followers to think about new ways of doing things. And the last I, the fourth I, is individualized consideration. Transformational leaders tend to take an individualized approach to their followers. They tend to try to understand their needs, and based on that understanding, they take an individualized approach to help them grow and succeed. So they are quite often engaging in coaching and mentoring and showing empathy and empowering them. So those are the 4 I's of transformational leadership. Here is another graphic that shows the additive effect of transformational leadership. You see on the bottom, the transactional leadership, those contingent rewards, and management by exception, passive and active. And when a leader engages in this type of leadership, that will lead to expected outcome, so achieve the stated goal. When a leader engages in addition, let's say, to provide some contingent reward, but engaging in transformational leadership, for example, the 4 I's, they really serve a role model. They are inspiring them. They are challenging them to think outside the box, and they show individual consideration. Then followers tend to perform beyond expectations. So you see this additive effect of transformational leadership. There are 2 other approaches of transformational leadership that I would like for you to be aware of. The first one is by Bennis and Nanus, and they say, in their work, they identify several elements of transformational leadership. The first one is that transformational leaders tend to be visionary. They know where they want to take organization, and they are able to create this clear vision and then communicate that vision to the followers. After they develop that vision, they tend to create some type of organization in order to work together, in order to achieve that vision. So they are social architects. They're able to blend or to combine different parts of organization. They are influencing the organizational culture, influencing the norm of organization that are going to and create those strong cultures that are going to work towards the vision. Also, they are trust builders. We've talked another approach to leadership that trust is the foundation of every single relationship, and especially when I talk from the relational leadership approaches, as that where transformational leadership belongs to. Therefore, trust is important. So transformational leaders tend to be trust builders. And then creative deployment of self. Here they're focusing on that understanding of self-regard or self-concept. So transformational leaders have a high degree of self-awareness. And then based on that self-awareness, they immerse themselves fully within the organization. Here we have a quote from Bennis and Nanus that proposed about transformational leadership, that transformational leaders move organization from current to future states, that visionary aspect. They create vision of potential opportunities for organizations, moving them at a higher level. They instill within employees a commitment to change and instill new cultures and strategies that mobilize and focus energy and resources. And the next one, it's by Kouzes and Posner. Kouzes and Posner have been working for over 20 years on this, and they published the 5 Practices of Exemplary Leadership book. Their approach has a prescriptive overtone. In fact, there is a leadership practices inventory that they developed, so leaders could complete that inventory, and then based on that, they will know how frequently they engage in behaviors that are related to the 5 practices, and then they could engage in leadership training and development. So they identify 5 practices of exemplary leadership. The first one, it's modeling the way. Here in this situation, leaders tend to have strongly held values, and then they set an example for others to follow, and those values are exemplified in a leader's behavior. This is really the foundation of their model. That the leadership starts with the transformational leadership starts with who leaders are, and then they know who they are, they know their values, then they set an example for others to follow. So they model the way for others to follow. Also, transformational leaders tend to create and inspire a shared vision. In this situation, leadership, it's not about one person's vision, but it's about a shared vision. So in this situation, leaders tend to work with others to find the aspirations of others, and then together they create and shape a vision for the future. Then after that, they challenge the process. So they have a vision. How are we going to change the way things are in order to achieve that vision? So they are always looking for new ways to do things. They are creative, and they are challenging others to be creative. And they then tend to take risks. And then enable others to act in this situation, similar to Bennis and Nanus's approach. Trust, it's an important element. Enable others to act, because you have to have this relationship between leaders and followers. So here, leaders will tend to build trust, but then provide opportunities for training and development, for providing with new skills, new experiences, in order for followers to be able to work towards the goals that need to be achieved. And then the last one is encouraging the heart. So here they're saying leaders should recognize contributions of people who are working towards the shared vision, and then create celebrations in the end. That way you encourage the heart. So those are 5 practices of exemplary leadership. Again, if any of you are interested, you could Google, where I think it's their books are published by Wiley, and you can find more information about the LPI. There is a student version as well, a student leadership challenge. And if any of you has any questions, I'm a certified facilitator for the student leadership challenge. I'd be glad to provide you with more information. So what's next? What are some lessons learned? Again, transformational leadership, it's one of the most popular approaches to leadership. When somebody speaks on TV about leadership, that's what they talk about transformational leadership. And this approach to leadership, leaders tend to inspire and motivate others to perform at a higher level than other leadership approaches. And leaders tend to be visionary, and then they focus on changing things. In other words, they are trying to transform people and places, and they are role models for others and challenge followers to grow and succeed. Again, they deal with values, motives, ethics, and etc. That's it for now. Please let me know if you have any questions, and write your comments and below this video. And